Hogwarts Gene-Splicing Prodigy, Magical Creatures Meets Sci-Fi. Like, share and subscribe. Episode 91, Halloween Party, Skull Band. After chatting with the Bloody Barrow, Peter walked to the auditorium. As soon as I entered the gate, I saw that all the candles floating in the air were gone, but replaced by jack-o'-lanterns. There are also many transformed bats flying and squeaking non-stop. There was a lot of food on the table, but it was all horrible. Bloody cakes, sausages and ketchup create a bloody intestine effect. And the soup is full of realistic eyeballs that are still moving. These terrifying foods almost spit out Peter's stomach acid, and now he has completely lost his taste. Alan, who was enjoying the meal, looked at Peter in surprise and asked, "Why don't you eat it?" The taste is pretty good, especially the eyeballs in the soup, which are made of tapioca flour and sticky when chewed. Peter listened to Alan's description, his face was blue, and he asked with difficulty, "Don't you think these foods look horrible and disgusting?" "No, 020 is all conjured up with magic, it's not disgusting." Alan looked at his roommate with a puzzled expression. Well, Peter gave up arguing with him completely. No wonder wizards in Muggle movies and novels are so scary. Anyone who sees the bloody and gloomy appearance in the Great Hall will probably have nightmares. It is precisely because they admire the rough nerves of the wizards. Peter looked around and found that the students from the wizarding world and the Muggle world could tell the difference at a glance. Those students who were eating bloody sausages and real eyeball soup were probably all from the wizarding world. Students with the same expression as Peter, and even vomited, are definitely from the Muggle world. I can't blame Peter for not being able to eat it, it's because of the magic effect, these things are so realistic. The visual impact is too strong. Enduring the horrific scene, Peter breathed a sigh of relief until all the food was gone. Tonight he has to go to the back kitchen and ask the house elves for some food. The original seats of teachers in the auditorium have been removed and turned into a stage shape, and the long tables of the 4 colleges have also been moved to both sides, leaving a middle position. Dumbledore walked onto the stage with a smile on his face, and then announced to the crowd, "Tonight we are honored to invite the Skull Band, and they will be celebrating Halloween with everyone. Let's welcome them with warm applause." Upon hearing the name of the band, all the wizarding students burst into cheers. Only the Muggle students waited curiously for the band to appear, wanting to see what kind of band made these people so crazy. Peter sat on the long table, craned his neck in anticipation, then stared at the band members who appeared on stage. Well, they shouldn't be called people, because they are veritable skeletons. These skeletons had musical instruments hanging on their bodies, walked very flexibly to the middle of the stage, and posed their poses. With the wizard using his wand to change the lights of different colors, these skeletons played the musical instruments, and then there was an opening dance. The white skeleton members lined up in a row and knocked the board of the stage neatly with the bones of the feet, which sounded like tap dancing. Accompanied by the dynamic music, the students in the audience cheered excitedly around the stage and danced with the skeletons. Peter's eyes widened, looking at the dancing skeletons to see if they were controlled by a wizard behind their backs with magic. After all, these skeletons are bare bones, and they don't look like they can move on their own. Alan stood beside Peter, roaring and jumping excitedly, his face full of excitement. After the hot dance, a skeleton wearing sunglasses stepped forward, carrying a guitar, posing coolly, playing music, and cheering from the audience, "Climb Climb Climb." Then the skull in sunglasses, holding a microphone, sang directly along with the music. The owl flies with the white clouds, letters in green ink from a mysterious distance, lively alley hidden by brickwork, fill all your dreams. Dawn wakes the castle windows, floating flickering candles light up the auditorium, riding and whistling on the field. Peter listened to the song and thought it was pretty good, like a country tune, and it sounded like it was describing Hogwarts. And to Peter's surprise, the vocals of the lead singer's sunglasses skeleton are very magnetic and emotional. The only thing that makes Peter a little weird is that this is sung by a skeleton. And there is a group of skeletons accompaniment and dance. Combined with the atmosphere of Halloween, it feels like coming to the ghost world. Afterwards, the skeleton band continued to perform a dance. The accompanying skeletons directly removed their ribs, used them as wooden sticks, and beat them on the drums. The rhythm was cheerful and weird. At the climax of the band's performance, the skeletons invited some students and professors to dance together. Peter sat down and looked at the stage with wide eyes. Dumbledore happily pulled a Miss Skeleton and danced a cheerful dance. Professor Flitwick was held on his shoulders by a strong skeleton, dancing dynamic dance and laughing. With his red face, I don't know if he was drunk or excited. There is also a senior Gryffindor girl who was invited. After dancing a waltz with the lead singer, she took off the lead singer's skull and kissed it hard. 2 red lips were printed on Bisonson's skull. Print. Peter looked at the crazy students around him, and could only sit in his own position, watching the strange scene very uncomfortable. He looked around and found that there was a girl on his side who was also alone. Sitting there was Angelina Johnson of Gryffindor. It happened that she also looked here, and the two looked at each other with mutual sympathy. As students of the Muggle world, they are still somewhat uncomfortable with the wizarding world. "Peter, why are you still sitting here? Come and dance with us." The twins ran over, pulling him excitedly into the crowd. Being carried by the two, Peter struggled a few times before giving up. Then he asked them amusingly, "Why are you willing to talk to me now? Didn't you all cut off your friendship with me because of the Quidditch match earlier?" These two guys have been avoiding Peter since Charlie Weasley was knocked unconscious in the infirmary with a stick by a Slytherin team member and lost the game. It made Peter think that they were taking their anger on him and were not ready to communicate with him. As a result, they came to him now. "How could I ignore you? Who said that?" George said with an expression that never happened. "We're just a little busy at this time, and you've been in the library all the time, and we don't like going there. That's why we can't meet each other. How can there be a breakup?" Fred 3.2 rolled his eyes and said confidently, "Actually, after the Quidditch match, there was a strong smell of gunpowder between Gryffindor and Slytherin. If we commit crimes against the wind and play together, people in both academies will think we are traitors. That would be miserable. So we can only pretend that our relationship with you has faded. This is for #7. Yes, that's the reason." George insisted that was the reason. Peter smiled and shook his head, but he didn't care too much. He is a mature person of psychological age, and naturally he doesn't care about the words of 2 11-year-old children. And even if they really broke up with him, he wouldn't be too sad. "Okay, don't think about anything else. Dumbledore finally invited the skeleton band today, we can't just waste our time here," Fred said cheerfully while twisting his hips. "Compared to the weird sisters that Mom likes band, I think Skull is cooler." Episode 92. Professor Green is an animal trafficker? Take it away. After being pulled by the twins to dance a burlesque dance, Peter finally couldn't be ashamed to continue dancing, and hurriedly took the opportunity to escape from here and left the auditorium. Walk along the stairs towards Hufflepuff's dormitory. He is going to the back kitchen to find something to eat. "I didn't eat dinner, and I was dragged by the twins to dance for a while, and now I am a little hungry." It's just that he found a sneaky figure in front of him, carrying a leather suitcase and walking outside. Peter took a closer look and found that it was Professor Green. Peter hurriedly cast a disillusionment spell on himself, stuck it to the corner, and followed. Green was teaching, looking a little wary, watching the surrounding movement from time to time. The suitcase in his hand was constantly vibrating, and there was a roar coming from inside. "Damn it. Be quiet." Professor Green was different from the old-fashioned look in the past. At this time, his expression was a bit violent, and he slapped the box viciously to calm the contents inside. Peter was a little speechless at this time. Shouldn't the Halloween curse be triggered when Harry Potter comes? Why does it appear now? Especially looking at Green's appearance at this time, 02 makes it hard not to believe that he is doing bad things. Although Peter didn't want to follow Professor Green, after all, Green was an old Auror with strong anti-reconnaissance ability. If he was not careful, he would be discovered by him, and Peter would not have the confidence to defeat him at that time. But the system suddenly jumped out and gave a task. Ding! The host has found the sneaky defense against the dark arts professor. Please ask the host to find out Professor Green's intentions, and the task will be rewarded with 20 points. 10 points for reporting to other professors. 30 points for catching him. 35. System tasks are not necessary tasks. As a prudent Peter, he generally does not take risks, but the reward of system points is too tempting. He has only accumulated 15 points by reading and studying in this period of time, but this time the task has a total of 60 points. How many books does he have to read to get these points? The reward of the final points encouraged him. He followed Professor Green from a distance with the disillusionment charm. First, he found out what this Professor Green was doing. What was in his suitcase? After following Professor Green out of the castle and walking down the path, Peter realized that this was going to the Forbidden Forest. Perhaps considering the reason of Hagrid, Green bypassed Hagrid's wooden house far away, and then did not enter the Forbidden Forest. Inside. Peter thought about it for a while, turned into a phoenix, and then used the bird and snake skills to directly control and shrink his body. In the blink of an eye, Peter turned into a red bird the size of a thumb. Chase Green. Green's footsteps were not fast, and Peter quickly caught up. At this time, his body was very small, flying among the trees, and it was difficult to be found. After tracking for a while, Peter in midair found Green stopped in front of a giant tree, and then saw him tap his wand rhythmically on the tree trunk a few times, and then he disappeared in place in a blink of an eye. Peter, who was hiding in the tree, looked at the scene just now in surprise. Obviously, this giant tree is an entrance. He flew down directly, then changed back to human form, carefully summoned a small snake, and controlled it to touch the position of the tree trunk. But after waiting for a while, the little snake was still lying there, nothing happened. This time Peter came up himself, and he looked at the giant tree, which was no different from the other trees around. It's just that the tree is relatively old and almost needs 2 people to hug it. He stretched out his wand and tapped according to Green's rhythm just now, and then he felt the magic fluctuations from the tree trunk. He quickly used the bird and snake skill to shrink himself to the size of his little finger, and then touched the tree trunk. This time the tree trunk seemed to not exist, and Peter fell directly into it. Then, accompanied by a dizzy teleportation magic, he disappeared in place. During the teleportation, Peter tried his best to maintain his shrunken state to avoid being discovered when he arrived. In the blink of an eye, Peter felt down to earth again, and when he regained his senses, he realized that he was no longer in the Forbidden Forest, but appeared in a large room. There was a mess around the room, there were piles of iron cages, and there were traces of blood on the ground. In the middle of the house, there was the leather suitcase that Green was carrying. At this time, the suitcase was opened with its front facing upwards, and there was a screeching sound from the entrance of the pitch-black suitcase. Peter directly transformed into a phoenix the size of an index finger and flew over the box. I can see that there is still room in the box, apparently cast a traceless stretch charm. It looks like Newt Scamander's leather box. After a while, he heard the animals roaring in pain and Green's cursing, which made Peter very curious about what was going on inside. He flew straight down into the box, and in the blink of an eye, the box was like another world. The space here was huge, as big as a football field. Peter followed the sound and flew over Green, and saw Green was torturing an adult unicorn. The unicorn was firmly trapped by the chain and could not move, but Green made a whip from the wand in his hand and slapped the unicorn fiercely, causing the unicorn to whine in pain. In the big iron cage beside the unicorn, a pure golden juvenile unicorn anxiously called out to the adult unicorn. "You damned beast, you actually hurt me. If it weren't for the unicorn being valuable, I would have killed you early." Green cursed while beating, his face was full of viciousness. Peter looked at the scene in front of him, a little unbelievable. As a retired Auror, Green was not related to animal dealers. But the magical animals he saw here were not only unicorns, but also horned camels, lunar beasts, wicked birds 020s and 8-eyed giant spiders. And these animals are locked in iron cages, they are thin and hungry. And according to what he just said, these animals are all going to be sold. The fact that a generation of Aurors is still a fantastic beast dealer is hilarious. Peter instantly remembered how many times he had seen Green carrying a suitcase in and out of Hogwarts. Immediately understood that this guy was probably imitating Newt Scamander, used the traceless stretching charm to create a space in his suitcase, then quietly went to the Forbidden Forest, captured magical animals, put them in the suitcase, and take it back to his office. It's just that Newt Scamander opened up the box space to protect the magical animals, and this Green is to sell the magical animals. These goddamn fairies, don't they owe them 6,000 gold galleons, they are so eager to reincarnate. Green muttered to himself as he beat the unicorn, "When I sell this batch of goods, I can earn 30,000 gold galleons. When the time comes, I will ask you to beg me." Seeing this situation, Peter turned around and flew away. The system has rewarded him with 20 points, indicating that he has completed the first task of the system. Flying out of the suitcase, Peter fell back to human form. He directly closed the box on the ground and locked the lock to prevent Green from coming out. Then directly turned into a phoenix, grabbed the suitcase, turned into flames and disappeared in place. Episode 93 Professor Green gets out of trouble, Peter is exposed. In the Forbidden Forest, there was a flash of fire, and Peter appeared with a suitcase. He originally wanted to hand over the suitcase and Professor Green inside to Dumbledore as soon as possible, so that the task given by the system would be completed. There was no need for him to risk confronting Green. But obviously he still underestimated the strength of Green, who was born as an Auror. He was just about to take the box back to school, but the box in his hand shook violently, accompanied by Green's roaring and cursing. After a while, there was a violent explosion and the panicked roar of animals. Then the suitcase in Peter's hand was pierced with a big hole by a spell. The suitcase broke free from Peter's hand, fell to the ground, and opened automatically. The space inside the suitcase was destroyed by the spell, and then it was like nausea. He immediately spit out everything inside. The one who was spit out together was Green. He stumbled to the ground, and then stood up with a quick roll. He vigilantly looked around with his wand, and roared, "Who is it? Come out." Peter maintained the form of a little phoenix at this time, and quietly hid in the tree and looked at Green below with a look of annoyance. Experience kills. Peter only remembers that Newt Scamander couldn't get out after being locked in a crate during the Battle of New York, but he forgot that if the space where the untraceable stretch charm was cast was destroyed, everything inside would be destroyed. Was spit out. Damn, if you have the ability to follow me, don't you have the ability to fight me alone? Coward, coward. Come out. Green looked around and found no figure, but he must have been hiding nearby. Somewhere. But after some verbal provocation, no one came out, so he directly attacked the surrounding frantically, trying to force the hidden person out. Green was hit with dust by his spell, and the tree trunks burst. Under the intensive spell, the surrounding ground seemed to be plowed again, and the leaves and trunks were all pierced by the spell. Peter looked at the scene in front of him and couldn't help but be surprised. As expected of an old Auror, although this spell attack looks like a mess, shooting all over the sky, but if you take a closer look, you will find that he hardly missed an inch of the surrounding space. If someone is hiding nearby, they must have been forced out. But Green obviously didn't know the special force, and he didn't find a little red bird the size of an index finger hidden in the tree. After attacking for a while, no one came out. Green was also puzzled. Could it be that the stalker had already left? Thinking that the stalker was probably someone from the school, and when he thought that Dumbledore would be led over, Green was ready to leave the place immediately. He just turned his head and looked around, and the magical animals in the iron cage were spit out and piled up into hills. A struggle flashed across Green's face. He didn't want to give up these hard-to-catch prey. But now that the suitcase has been destroyed by him, it will take a while to repair and cast the traceless stretching charm again. He was worried that the person following him during this time would report his track to others. This is 30,000 galleons. Green's eyes flashed with heat, and then he fell into a painful choice. In the end, his calm thinking as an Auror worked, and Green gritted his teeth and decided to abandon the shipment. If the goods are gone, we can try to find a way next time, but if he is found, he will have to stay in Azkaban for the rest of his life. Peter was also secretly anxious when hiding in the tree, seeing Green going away. If he didn't catch him this time, he wouldn't have such a chance next time. Even if he followed up with the professors to report Green's sale of forbidden forest animals, I'm afraid there is no way to get Green's attention other than to scare the snakes. Because Grimm is an old Auror with a lot of connections in the Ministry of Magic, the experts wouldn't believe a child's word and doubt a positive Auror. And he is more anxious about his points. If he misses this opportunity, it will be difficult to have such a big reward opportunity in the future. That's giving up a full 40 points. After thinking about it for a while, Peter's eyes were firm. He directly changed back to human form, stretched out his wand from among the dense leaves, aimed at Green under the tree, and a silent stun spell quickly shot at him. The speed of the spell was very fast. Seeing that it was about to hit Green's back, it was suddenly blocked by an invisible shield. Green, who was eliminating the evidence, suddenly turned his head, with a strange smile on his face. Grab as you break apart. Green cast a spell directly at the tree behind him, and the giant tree blew up into pieces. Peter, who was hiding in the tree, only had time to cast an iron armor spell to protect himself, and then he exposed his tracks. As the sawdust dissipated, Peter's figure appeared in Green's eyes. Green was surprised at first, then he showed a dangerous smile, and said, "Ah, look who it is. It's the little wizard of Slytherin. Your name is Peter York, right? What are you doing here without going to the dance? You must know that the Forbidden Forest is a very dangerous place. Think about it, a first-year freshman wants to go to the Forbidden Forest to explore beyond his control, and then there are no bones left. Such a sad ending." Looking at the killing intent in Green's eyes, Peter pretended to be innocent and asked angrily, "Professor Green, you are a professor at the school, or an honorary Auror. Why do you do this kind of business of selling magical creatures?" Green looked at the innocent little boy in front of him. His guard relaxed a little, looked at Peter as if he were watching an animal in a cage, and then sneered, "Ors? Humph, only you little children really think that amazing, how much I worked so hard for the Ministry of Magic. After retirement, the Ministry of Magic is like sending beggars. Send me with 1,000 gold galleons. And those greedy goblins set me up. Well, I not only lost the 1,000 galleons. They also made me owe 10,000 galleons. They also threatened me if I didn't repay the money as soon as possible. If I do, I will shake out all the things I did before, and ruin my reputation." Green said with a look of fear and hatred, "I scraped everything together and sold all the treasures to barely collect 4,000 galleons. But those goblins are still not satisfied. They like to torture people like dementors. Squeeze me again and again. Finally, I remembered an animal trafficker I caught before. He had a cross-border trading line in his hands. I used to want to continue to follow this line and find everyone. So I didn't follow the ministry. Report in advance." 35 Green said with a smile, but his eyes showed a chill. "But before it's finished, the Ministry of Magic forced me to retire. I owe the goblin money again, and I can only change hands and cooperate with the former animal dealer. It's ridiculous." Episode 94 Crazy Green, Field's Nirvana again. "I was wondering where to look for magical creatures, and I saw the recruitment of a defense against the dark arts professor at Hogwarts, which was a godsend. Because the Forbidden Forest is home to the largest colony of unicorns in Scotland, and lots of fantastic beasts. It's a cornucopia. A unicorn can be sold for 2,000 gold galleons, and the little unicorn is even more expensive. Those wealthy pure-blooded wizard ladies abroad like this kind of unicorn the most. There is also the eight-eyed giant spider. A pint of venom is as high as 100 galleons. And there are at least tens of thousands of eight-eyed giant spiders in the Forbidden Forest. This is a steady stream of golden galleons. Why are you telling me so much?" Peter asked, frowning. "Why?" Green laughed and said with a frantic expression, "I'm driven crazy by these things, but I have nowhere to tell. Now that I meet a little wizard like you, I just spit it out. Of course, I won't let it go. Everyone else who knows these secrets will only remember that I've always been that old-fashioned old or. When this transaction is completed, I will have tens of thousands of galleons. Enough to live the rest of my life comfortably. I will not allow anyone to spoil my plan." You're going to kill me." 35 Peter looked terrified, then pleaded, "Please, I don't want to die. I won't tell 020 anyone else what happened tonight. Or you can cast me a spell to forget about tonight. I remember there is a magic called the Forgetfulness Mantra. Oh, you also know the Oblivion Curse. No wonder he is a little wizard who is called a genius by other professors." Green said in surprise, then looked pity on his face, "But I can't leave any hidden dangers. Dumbledore is very powerful, maybe even can make you remember. So sorry, boy, you have to die. Don't worry, I will hold a moment of silence for you at your funeral." With that said, Green pointed out his wand directly at Peter, and the tip of the wand emitted a creepy green light. "Professor, you're talking too much." Peter's face suddenly disappeared, and he said sarcastically, "Field." Peter shouted. In an instant, Phoenix Field appeared out of thin air, grabbed the wand in Green's hand with one claws, grabbed it without him noticing, and flew away. Field grabbed the wand and flew over Peter's head, throwing Green's wand at him. Taking this dark wand, Peter smiled and looked at Green in the distance. "Professor Green, it seems that you still can't kill me." AC/DC. Green was a little stunned, and then looked at the phoenix in the air, with a look of annoyance, and then full of envy and greed. "How could I forget that you still have a phoenix? If I have a phoenix, I will not worry about food and clothing in this life." Not the slightest look of panic when the wand is taken away. Peter looked at Green vigilantly, so fearless. "I'm afraid there is another move." As expected, Green flicked his wrist, and a wand was ejected from his wrist into his hand. "Spare wand. Didn't expect you to be so careful." 35 Peter was full of surprise, worthy of a seasoned old or. Holding the wand in his hand, Green looked at Peter coldly, and said, "Should I say that I am worthy of being a student of Slytherin? I actually deceived me. If I hadn't always been cautious, I would have fallen into your hands today. Your phoenix may be powerful, but you're still going to die with me." Green didn't say any more nonsense this time, and fired a fierce spell directly. Peter's iron armor spell was broken by a single blow, but fortunately he moved to the side to fight roll, dodge the attack. When Phoenix Field saw Peter being attacked, he leaned over and rushed towards Green, making a sharp screeching sound, constantly attacking Green with his claws, and his body also lit up with flames, trying to burn him to death. But Green was an experienced old Auror after all, and he kept attacking the phoenix with a spell to keep it from getting close to him. Then, from time to time, he shoots devastating spells at Peter. Green's strength was strong, but with the phoenix interfering, Peter breathed a sigh of relief. The pressure on his body dropped, and began to attack Green with the phoenix. The phoenix attack made Green unable to take care of Peter, which made him very angry. Damn beast, give me death. 0. Avada sudden. Green directly hit the phoenix with a suicidal spell. The phoenix made a mournful sound, and then it spontaneously ignited, turning into a mass of ashes. Felder. Peter shouted worriedly. Although he knew that the life-sucking charm would not kill Phoenix, he couldn't help but worry. Field suddenly appeared from the ashes, who was reborn. At this time, it was only the size of a chicken, and the feathers on his body had not yet grown. Peter looked at the appearance of Field at this time, and angrily threw a series of spells at Green, after repelling him, then took the opportunity to pick up the little Field and put it in the pocket of his shirt. Green looked at the phoenix on Peter's body in surprise and greed, and said, "Or give me your phoenix and I'll let you go. How about it? Dream." Peter roared angrily. Although Phoenix won't really die, the pain in Nirvana is still no less than death. Field has already experienced Nirvana twice for him. Then you can die. Green Ning said with a smile. Avada Kedavra. There is no way to resist the life-threatening curse, so Peter can only keep dodging, relying on the trees in the jungle to dodge everywhere. The life-suppressing spell is indeed one of the top black magics listed as one of the unforgivable spells. Every time a tree is hit, it seems to be drained of vitality and wither quickly. The dense trees in the Forbidden Forest gave Peter a chance to avoid the death-slaying charm. He hid behind the tree and directly cast a disillusionment charm on himself, then quietly walked around behind Green and waited quietly for the opportunity. Don't hide from York. Come out. Green followed unhurriedly, like a cat and mouse, playing with his prey playfully. This is the depths of the Forbidden Forest. No one will come here, you can't escape, it's gone. Come out and die. It's better than dying in pain later than when I catch it. Peter looked at Green, who seemed to be relaxed, but his whole body was tense. He held his breath carefully, for fear that he would find out. At this moment, the surroundings were silent, and Peter was hidden within 5 meters behind Green, daring not to dare. Make a little movement, or the tip of Grimm's wand will be able to issue a death-killing spell at any time. Peter has never experienced such a dangerous situation before. Although Green's strength is not comparable to that of the four principals, he is also a relatively strong member of the adult wizards. Especially a dark wizard who dares to use the life-suppressing spell. There is no chance of winning against him head-on. Episode 95 Capture Professor Green alive. The arrival of the centaurs, but fortunately, he still has the phoenix skill, which guarantees that he will not die. Moreover, he also has the skill of the size of the bird and snake, which makes it easy for him to escape. It's just that Peter doesn't want to leave in such an embarrassed way. Whether it's to avenge Field or to reward points, he has to catch this person. Seeing that there was no movement around him, Green looked impatient. One by one, the spells were torn apart, and they shot wildly around as if they didn't want money. Seeing that Peter, who was shrinking behind Green, was only 3 meters away, he was sweating. This crazy wizard. Peter looked at Green, who was getting closer and closer, and there was a silent flock of birds. A large group of birds appeared out of nowhere, flying around Green, blocking his sight. Peter quickly shrank his body and approached Green, and instantly turned into a giant more than 10 meters tall. He flew directly to Green. Then a cutting spell was precisely aimed at Green's right hand in mid-air. Click. Green, who was weightless in mid-air, only felt his right hand get cold, and his right hand accompanies him, and the wand in his hand immediately fell to the ground. Ah! Green screamed in pain as he held the wrist of his severed right hand. But then he looked in horror at Peter, who had turned into a giant, and kicked him directly. Green, who couldn't dodge, was kicked and slammed into a giant tree. Then he fell like a ragbag, lying on the ground and spitting up blood. Peter was still not at ease, so he added a stun spell, then a petrification spell, and finally made a rope to tie it up. Finally, after a careful search, he made sure that there were no more wands and magic items hidden on his body. Was relieved. Looking at Green, who looked like he was dead, Peter shrank back to his original height and kicked him hard. The old guy was so cautious, maintaining the shield all the time, blocking all of Peter's attacks. In the end, Peter risked stealth to approach and waited for himself to enter the range of the protective shield before launching a surprise attack. Tweet. Field popped his head out of Peter's pocket. Field, I've avenged you. Are you happy? Peter asked softly, holding up Field, who looked like a chicken. If there is one person in this world that can make Peter completely reassured and trusted, it is Phoenix Field. Animals are pure-hearted, and once they are loyal, they will never betray. Field has now saved himself twice. Seeing the chaos around him, Peter was secretly surprised. He still underestimated the strength of the wizards. Such an aura has emptied all the trees within a radius of tens of meters, and the ground is full of deep pits created by the curse. Looking at the animals in the iron cage, one horned camel was hit by the magic spell launched by Green, and it was already dead. The other animals were also in shock, and they shrank in the iron cage and did not dare to move. Only the unicorn bound by the iron chain, with the scars from the whip on its white body, still held its head high and neighed unyieldingly, and its eyes were always watching the little golden unicorn in the iron cage. Peter looked at the chain on the unicorn and wanted to untie it for her, but the unicorn was very resistant to his approach and looked at him vigilantly. I won't hurt you, I just want to remove this chain for you. You see, I have defeated him just now, I'm not a bad guy. Peter spread his hands to signal that he was not in danger, expressed kindness to her, and then slowly approached. Hearing Peter's words, the unicorn's resistance was slightly reduced, and the unicorn was very intelligent and could understand human words. Only after being captured and abused by Green, she no longer trusts the same humans as Green. Peter's wand tapped the chain on the unicorn's body, and the chain snapped. Then he just stepped back and stopped disturbing the vigilant unicorn. Then looking at the animals in the surrounding iron cages, he considered how to bring them out of the forbidden forest as evidence of Green's crime. Suddenly, the sound of horses' hooves sounded, and Peter instantly took out his wand and pointed to the sound. Who? Come out. We have no malice, little wizard, please put down our hostility. A deep voice came from the depths of the forest, and then came out two centaurs with silver-white hair and reddish-brown fur. Peter remembered the reddish-brown centaurs. The last time I saw him, it seemed to be called Bane. The two centaurs looked in shock at the destroyed woods, the animals in the iron cage, and Peter standing alone. Bane stepped forward and asked, You are Peter York, right? Don't know what's going on here? Can you tell us? 0 for flowers. Pointing his wand to Green, who was trapped not far away, Peter explained, the wizard was an animal dealer, and after applying for a professorship at the school, he took this opportunity to hunt in the forbidden forest, trying to smuggle animals. Go out and sell it. Then I bumped into it by accident, so that's how it is now. When the two centaurs heard Peter's words, their faces were full of disbelief, and Bane even blurted out, You mean you defeated the wizard and tied him up? Peter looked at their unbelieving expressions, although he didn't want to explain too much, but considering that he had to get help from centaurs, he said, Don't you know how to communicate with unicorns? It just so happened that this dark wizard caught a pair of unicorns. Beast mother and son, you can go and ask her. He said, pointing to the pair of unicorns where the iron cages were piled up. 0. Diana. How did you get caught? Bane called out her name in surprise when he saw the unicorn. When the unicorn saw the centaur, his eyes showed joy, and he approached the centaur intimately and neighed. After communicating for a while, the two centaurs looked angry and surprised for a while, and then looked at Peter, who was leisurely beside him, in disbelief. Mr. York, Diana has already told us. Thank you for saving them. We haven't seen them for a few days. We are very worried, but we didn't expect to be caught by the dark wizard. Bane said gratefully. Speaking of which, we haven't personally expressed our gratitude to you. Thank you for sending the phoenix to rescue us last time, or we might all be buried in the mouth of the eight-eyed giant spider. You're welcome, last time was a coincidence, and it was mainly due to my phoenix, I didn't do anything. Peter put the credit on Field, and he didn't want people to know that he was the phoenix. Speaking of the phoenix, I don't know if Mr. York can summon your companions. We just picked some berries. These berries are the favorite food of birds. We want to give him a taste to express our gratitude. And took out some red fruits from the animal skin bag behind him. Thank you for your kindness, but Felder was hit by the dark sorcerer's life-sucking curse just now in order to save me. He has already passed away, and he is still too young to eat. Peter took out the phoenix in his pocket, his face full of helplessness. Say it. Episode 96 The Gift of the Centaur, report back to the castle. Life Sue. My Sharon, How crazy is this person to use such black magic on a child? The two centaurs exclaimed, and then saw the phoenix in Peter's hand, and said distressedly, Nirvana is the most painful time for Phoenix. I didn't expect this child to suffer a passive nirvana at such a young age. Peter felt a little guilty and dared not tell them that this was Field's second nirvana. The centaurs looked at the animals in the cage and said sympathetically, let's get these poor fellows out first, they have endured too much. 55. Peter shook his head and said, I don't recommend doing this now, these animals are evidence of the Dark Wizard's crime. If we let the evidence go, magic won't admit the man's guilt. Because this Dark Wizard is not only a professor at Hogwarts, but also an Auror who retired from 020 Hugh. For the prestige of the Ministry of Magic, if there is no iron proof, no one will want to believe me. Let this person still at large. Then he said to the centaurs, you can talk to the unicorns, can you please tell the unicorns about the situation, and tell them not to leave, as a proof of the Dark Wizard's crime. The centaurs thought for a while, then nodded in agreement. They also wanted the Dark Wizard to be punished. In the end, Bane had another centaur run back to the horde and find some more people to help. In the end, Peter was escorted by the centaurs to Hogwarts, and the remaining centaurs stayed to take care of the animals in the cage and protect the scene from damage. With the horses leading the way, Peter quickly reached the edge of the Forbidden Forest, and behind him was Green, who was trapped in the air, held only by a rope. Peter holds his wand in his right hand and Green's two wands in his left. Okay, Peter, we'll send you here. You take this Dark Wizard to Dumbledore quickly, lest there be an accident. Bane said to Peter. Okay, thank you for sending me back, you can go back first. Peter said gratefully. He had already gotten to know Bane very well along the way, and although these centaurs were xenophobic, they had nothing to do with this little boy who had rescued them. The sorcerer, showing an approachable attitude. You are a friend recognized by our centaurs. In the future, you can play this flute if you need it. We will do our best to complete it. You are also very welcome to our centaurs. Our elders are very much looking forward to meeting with you. Meet you. Bane handed Peter a bone flute, and laughed. Peter took the flute, put it in his backpack solemnly, and said happily, I will be a guest when I have time. I am also very curious about the culture of the centaurs. After saying goodbye to the centaurs, Peter took Green to Hogwarts, but he just walked out of the Forbidden Forest when he bumped into Hagrid, who was returning from the banquet. Hagrid was clearly having a good time at the party, flushing red and humming skulls. Seeing Peter coming out of the Forbidden Forest, Hagrid was stunned for a moment, then said very angrily, Peter, have you gone to the Forbidden Forest? It's already night, and the Forbidden Forest is very dangerous. I want to tell your dean this. Something that will make you remember for a long time. Then he noticed Green, who was being held by Peter and was tied up in midair. He woke up with alcohol and said in a panic, Peter York. What the hell are you doing? Why are you tying Professor Green? Peter looked at the big man and said quickly, Hagrid, calm down first. I don't have time to explain that much to you, you just need to know that Professor Green is a dark wizard, and I want to see Dumbledore now. Do you know where he is? Dumbledore? He just sent off the skulls, and he should be in the auditorium now. Hagrid replied instinctively, then came back to his senses and said, you said Professor Green was a dark wizard. That's impossible, he's an Auror, caught a lot of dark wizards, how could it be a dark wizard? You must be mistaken. Put him down. 35. Hearing that Dumbledore was still in the auditorium, Peter dragged Green and ran quickly to the auditorium, leaving Hagrid standing dumbfounded. Then Hagrid, who woke up, also quickly walked back to see what was going on. In the corridor, students came out of the banquet one after another, and then they saw a shocking scene. A student dragged a person floating in the air, not sure whether it was dead or alive, and ran quickly in the corridor. After a closer look, I found that the person floating was their defense against the dark arts Professor Green. Moreover, Professor Green was tied tightly with his body, his right hand was missing, and blood was dripping continuously. The students looked at this scene in horror and avoided Peter, as if he was a tiger. Arriving outside the auditorium gate, Peter ran into the Weasley twins, his eyes lit up, and he hurried towards them, shouting, George, Fred. Is Dumbledore still inside? When the twins saw Peter and Professor Green behind them, they were startled for a moment, then ran over quickly and asked in unison, Peter, what are you doing? Did you kill Professor Green because you didn't like it? Peter was speechless for a moment. What time is this, and he can still joke? He quickly asked, is Dumbledore in there? Professor Green is a dark wizard. I need to see Dumbledore. When they heard Peter say that Green was a dark wizard, they both couldn't believe it, but nodded and said, "It's still inside, Professor Flitwick's joke is not over yet, and Dumbledore is listening to his joke. I won't tell you any more, I'll go first." Peter bypassed the two brothers and hurried to the inside. Leaving the twins to look at each other, the two of them looked at each other, and the two brothers who were in the same mind suddenly had an idea. "Fred," Peter said, "Professor Green was a dark wizard. Do you think it's true?" George said. "George, anything is possible at Hogwarts. I wouldn't be surprised if Dumbledore is a woman one day," Fred said with a grin. "So, we believe in Peter 3.2. The twins said in unison, "We're going to see too, Peter versus the dark wizard Professor Green, this is so cool." The two brothers turned around and walked back into the auditorium. The auditorium was almost gone, except for a few scattered students. Dumbledore on the professor's chair was listening to Professor Flitwick's jokes, laughing from time to time. Professor McGonagall was directing several senior students to move the desks and chairs back to their original positions. And the drunk Professor Kettleburn, whispering with his prosthetic arm in his arms. But as soon as Peter came in, everyone's eyes were instantly focused on him and Professor Green behind him. "Merlin. What the hell happened? What's wrong with Professor Green?" Professor McGonagall exclaimed when he saw Professor Green, who was unknowingly behind Peter. Episode 97 The Shock of the Professors, the Chancellor's Office. Immediately, she noticed that Professor Green was tightly bound by ropes, as well as the amputation of his right hand that was dripping blood, and looked at Peter with a calm face. "Peter York, can you tell me why Professor Green is bound by ropes? What's with his injuries?" "Minerva, calm down first." Dumbledore appeared next to Professor McGonagall at some point, and he gave Professor Green a close look, then turned to Peter. "Peter, can you tell me what's going on? Why did you tie up Professor Green and put stunning and petrifying charms on him?" Professor Green is a dark wizard. He secretly hunts and sells magical animals in the Forbidden Forest." Peter explained everything Green did in detail. Some of his own details were slightly blurred a bit. "You said that Professor Green sold magical animals and attacked you with the death curse?" Professor McGonagall exclaimed, his eyes full of disbelief. In her eyes, Professor Green was a bit rigid, but he was still a respected old Auror. Dumbledore looked serious, stared at Peter and asked, "Peter, you know that if you slander your teacher, you will be severely punished. You need proof that what you said is true. Otherwise, it is impossible for us to suspect that an Auror who has been conscientious in his job for decades, not to mention that he is still a professor in our school." Peter directly handed out the two wands in his left hand and said, "This is Green's wand, and one of them is a spare wand. I remember there was a flashback spell that could tell us what magic the wand used before. Professor, you can try these two wands. Good knowledge." Dumbledore praised, and took the wand. After looking at it carefully, he pointed to one of them and said, "This wand is indeed Professor Green's." Immediately after a flashback spell, the top of the wand suddenly showed a creepy green light. "Merlin. It's the Deathstroke." Professor McGonagall recognized the black magic in the flashback charm, covering his mouth with a terrified look in his eyes. Then she turned to Dumbledore and asked, "Headmaster, this is a serious matter. A professor has cast an unforgivable curse on a student. What should be done?" Dumbledore looked at the wand with a very serious expression, and said solemnly, "This means we need to notify the Minister of Magic. This matter involves international animal trafficking, and the person involved is both Auror and professor, and it is destined to be restless. Now, Minerva, I need to trouble you to notify Minister Millicent Barnold and Amelia Burns from the legal division. We need them to come over." Professor McGonagall nodded and left the auditorium directly. Then Dumbledore waved the Elder Wand directly, and a cloud of silver gas shot out from the wand, forming a round silver ball. Dumbledore said to the silver ball, "Severus, please come to my office and bring Veritaserum, 35. Peter watched as Dumbledore finished speaking to a silver ball, and the silver ball went straight through the wall and disappeared. He said in surprise, "Headmaster Dumbledore, this should be the Guardian Charm. But I've never seen this spell before. And the message function? This is a little trick I came up with. After all, when the elderly always have physical inconvenience, they can call others at any time," Dumbledore said proudly. Then he looked at Green, who was hovering in mid-air, sighed and said, "I originally thought that Green, the old Auror, would come to teach you defense against the dark arts, but he had a purpose." Peter looked at Green coldly. If it wasn't for the system points, he would have directly set fire to the fire, and dared to use the death curse on him. As long as he got points, he would have a way to make it disappear. following Dumbledore to the door of the principal's office. Dumbledore looked at the statue of the griffin in front of him and muttered to himself, which is the secret word for opening the door. Oh, by the way, it's pineapple candied fruit. Oh, my memory has declined as I get older. This is the first time Peter has come to the principal's office. The round office walls are covered with photos of previous principals. There are many delicate silverware on the slender-legged table, whirling and spraying purple mist. On a shelf behind the desk stood the sorting hat, and in a glass case was an ornate silver sword. And across the table, there is a tall gilded perch with a phoenix standing on it. As soon as Peter came in, the photo on the wall opened, his eyes half squinted, and one of the gray-haired ladies saw Peter and shouted happily, "Little guy, what's your name?" "What a handsome guy." "Hello, Principal Dallas. I'm Peter York, a first-year Slytherin student, nice to meet you." Peter greeted her. He had seen her introduction in Hogwarts, a school history. The therapist, her portrait hangs in the principal's office and St. Mungo's Hospital, and can move freely between the two portraits. "What a polite little guy, what are you doing in the principal's office? Did you make a mistake?" Doris asked very kindly. "You're from Slytherin? How come I've never heard of the York family? You're a half-blood," an old wizard with a smart face and a goatee in the portrait interjected, his voice full of disgust. "Headmaster Black, I'm a muggle wizard, my parents are muggles, I'm sorry to disappoint you." Peter smiled at the old wizard. The Phineas Black, known as the most unpopular headmaster in Hogwarts history, was a radical pureblood. Slytherin is getting more and more depraved, and even let the hemp wizards come in. "It's not as good as when I was the principal," Phineas Black said, squinting. "I remember Headmaster Black, you are the most unpopular headmaster ever at Hogwarts. If you were to be the current headmaster, I'm afraid the school would be disbanded." Peter replied directly with a smile. "You rude brat. I'm the principal, you have to learn to respect." Principal Blake glared angrily. "Haha, Phineas, you were scolded by the students. You also have today." Another squatty principal laughed. Dumbledore walked in, holding the other end of Green's rope in his hand, and said with a smile, "It seems that you and the principals are having a good time chatting." 5. Peter thought to himself, "Which I did you see that I was having a good time with them?" Dumbledore directly transformed into a golden red chair and invited, "Sit down first, we have to wait for a while, what do you want to drink? Tea or pumpkin juice?" Peter looked at the Gryffindor-style chair, raised his eyebrows, took out his wand and clicked on the chair instantly turned silver green, then sat down and said, "Tea, thank you. Among the first-year students, you are the best transfiguration I have ever seen." Dumbledore praised, "Even I, or Minerva, didn't have the talent you have." 35. "Professor, you are so ridiculous. My current polymorphism can only transform between dead things, and there are dead things becoming living things becoming living things, and even the most advanced animagus, these I haven't learned yet." Peter said humbly, not thinking of himself as a genius at all. The corners of Dumbledore's mouth twitched. He only thought that this classmate was too Versailles. He was only a first-year student, and he had only been exposed to magic for a few months. If he was more powerful, would he have to give him the position of the principal? Episode 98, Professor Snape's Punishment, from the Ministry of Magic. Dumbledore knocked on the table in front of Peter, and a cup of black tea appeared, then took a box of sugar cubes from the box beside him, and asked, "How much do I need?" "I usually need 7 sugar cubes, that makes me feel good." Don't need to try?" $2 will do, thanks." Peter quickly rejected Dumbledore's offer. "Add so much sugar cubes, I'm afraid you're not drinking sugar water." "Dumbledore, who are you trying to interrogate? Use the Patronus charm to remind me that I'm just making potions, and I can't be distracted." 33. The wooden door of the principal's office was pushed open with a bang, and Snape walked in angrily and said. Then I saw the two people sitting in the office, their expressions were stunned, and then they asked, "Are you going to ask my students with Veritasum?" Hearing this, Dumbledore couldn't help laughing, and said, "Severus, am I that kind of person in your heart? This makes me so sad." "Who said that?" Snape snorted, then turned to look at Peter and asked, "What is the serious thing you're talking about? And what does it have to do with my students?" Peter found the strange Professor Green tonight, followed him, and found that Professor Green was selling magical animals. Dumbledore repeated what Peter said, and then pointed to the ground lying on the ground. Green said, in order to hide this, Green used the death curse on Peter. "This is very serious. I have asked Professor McGonagall to contact the minister and the director of the legal department, and it should be coming soon. After listening to Dumbledore's words, Snape was also surprised, and then looked at Green on the ground as if he were looking at a dead man. Then he came to Peter, looked at him carefully, and after confirming that he was not injured, he directly taunted, "I never knew Mr. York, who is of Gryffindor blood, so eager to find death. Or we Slytherin can no longer tolerate your curiosity. In such a hurry to track down an experienced old Auror, you will be lucky if you are not hit by the life-suppressing curse. When you go back, copy me the Slytherin code 100 times. 35. When Peter heard this, he immediately grimaced. Slytherin didn't know which class of ghosts came up with it, and used a long veil to write the Slytherin rules. Although Snape didn't like to deduct credits from his own academy students, he made a mistake. My favorite is to punish students for copying that stinky and long code. Dumbledore looked at the two of them with interest, as if he hadn't heard Snape's slap on Gryffindor in his words. It was the first time he had seen Snape take a student so seriously. Peter was uncomfortable with Professor Snape's stern eyes, and quickly changed the subject. "Principal, should we heal the wound on Professor Green's hand first, or if we keep bleeding like this, will we die?" Snape snorted at Peter's attempt to change the subject, then walked over to Professor Green, raised his severed wrist with his feet in disgust, turned his head and said in a satisfied tone, "Your cutting spell works well, cut off his entire hand directly. Where is his palm? If you don't connect it, you will be disabled in the future." "Ah, I seem to have been forgotten in the Forbidden Forest. I was full of fear at the time, so I only took Professor Green and his wand with me when I left, and I forgot to take the severed palm." Peter looked innocent. In fact, the palm of the hand, it is estimated that it has been eaten by the eight-eyed giant spider in the cage at this moment. Snape had a look that could see through him, and sneered, "You have the guts to stalk the professor, and even beat and caught him, so you'd forget his palm in fear?" Believe it or not, Peter looked like I believed it or not, and sat in his seat drinking tea silently. "Ah, Minister, they're coming," Dumbledore said suddenly. As soon as he finished speaking, 3 people appeared in the fireplace of the principal's office, 2 of whom were older women and the other was a younger man. Dumbledore smiled and opened his hands to welcome to the 2 ladies, and this gentleman. Due to the urgency of the matter, I had to call you all over the night. The middle-aged lady at the head was wrapped in a purple turban, and her face was somewhat dignified. She asked, "Dumbledore, I received a message from you all night long, saying that a dark wizard was caught. Where is he now?" Dumbledore didn't say much. Instead, he pointed to Green lying on the ground and said, "That is the dark wizard. He hunted precious magical animals in the Forbidden Forest, and planned to smuggle them out of Hogwarts to sell. After one of our students found out, he directly attacked the students with a life-threatening curse. The plot is very bad. I need you to come and witness together." 39. The 3 newcomers looked at the bound people on the ground, and among them the young wizard shouted in surprise, "Saraglin. How could it be him?" 99. The female minister, Millicent Barnold, was not very familiar with Green, and asked the wizard, "Roger, do you know this dark wizard power?" The wizard named Rog said in disbelief, "This is impossible, Minister. Green is a retiree of our Aurors. He has captured many dark wizards before. How can it be a dark wizard?" The female minister turned her head seriously and asked Dumbledore, "Dumbledore, please explain, what evidence do you have to prove that this old Auror is a dark wizard? Otherwise, even if you are the greatest wizard, we will never allow it someone smeared the honor of a member of the Ministry of Magic." Grave accent, "Come here, Peter." Dumbledore called to Peter, and then explained, "It was this student of mine who discovered Green's secret. He quietly followed him to the depths of the Forbidden Forest and discovered Green's secret base. There are magical creatures captured by Green." After listening to Dumbledore's words, everyone looked at the boy who was only 11 or 12 years old in amazement. It was this kid who caught Green, an old Auror? This is too far-fetched. The short-haired witch, who had been silent for a while, asked, "Saraglin is the old Auror of the Ministry of Magic. He has a pension. Why would he take such a risky thing?" "Ma'am, after finding me, Professor Green decided that I couldn't escape from his grasp. He told me that he owed the goblin 10,000 galleons. And he has an international trafficking line, so he wants to sell fantastic beasts in the Forbidden Forest, get money." Peter said, "Yes, and it seems that the goblins have a secret he doesn't know about and threaten him to pay back the money as soon as possible." 99. If you still can't believe it, please come and see these 2 wands first. Both wands are Grimm's, you can use the flashback charm to find out. Dumbledore picked up the 2 wands on the table. Handed to Minister Millicent Barnold, as well as Ms. Amelia Burns, the short-haired legal director. The two took the wands and used the flashback charm, and immediately a terrifying green light of the life-slaying charm flashed back on both wands. The two ladies almost didn't hold their wands. Merlin, I thought that since the Dark Lord disappeared, no one will use this terrible spell anymore. I didn't expect someone to use it again, and it was against a child. It's crazy. Minister Milisemba Nord exclaimed, and then said with a serious face, the impact of this incident is very bad. After finding the evidence, it must be severely punished, and it must not be forgiven lightly. Episode 99 Potent Veritaserum and Secrets. As one of the most powerful ministers of the Ministry of Magic, since she was appointed Minister of Magic in 1980, she insisted that the Aurors gain the power to use the unforgivable curse on the Death Eaters, and after Voldemort disappeared, she forcefully placed many pure bloods. The Death Eaters of the family are imprisoned in Azkaban. Over the years, after the Death Eaters were caught and disappeared, everything in the magic world was calm. There has not been such a serious incident in a long time, and the protagonist is still an old Auror from the Ministry of Magic. The reputation of the department has been seriously affected. As Minister Millicent Barnold, she has decided to step down after a few years, so she will never allow a taint in her political career. She looked at Green lying on the ground in disgust, and said to Dumbledore, I need to use your office as a makeshift interrogation room. 35. Please, ma'am. Dumbledore nodded happily, and then said, I've asked Professor Snape to bring the Veritaserum. When Green wakes up, he can take it and he should know what happened. Thank you, Dumbledore. Minister Millicent Barnold greeted Dumbledore, then stepped aside and said to Amelia Burns, You are the chief of the legal division, and Burns will be judged tonight. The director is in charge, Rog is the recorder. And the others are members of the observation team. When everyone was ready, Dumbledore directly lifted the spell on Green's body and gave 037 a quick recovery spell to wake him up. Ah, goddamn B**************** D. You actually hurt me. I want, Minister. Why are you here? Green, who had been in a coma, roared as soon as he woke up, and then I found that I was no longer in the Forbidden Forest, surrounded by people, and in front of him was the Minister of Magic with a serious face. I was stunned. As the person in charge of this trial, Amelia Burns saw Green sober and asked directly and solemnly, Sarajan, Peter York accuses you of selling the Forbidden Forest magical beasts and cast the unforgivable curse on him. Do you agree? What? Green was dumbfounded for a moment. He was just thinking about a prosperous future in the Forbidden Forest, and now he has become a criminal? As an experienced Auror, he immediately pretended to be innocent and was wronged with justice. He said with a sullen expression, Director, this is slander. I am an Auror, how could I do this? I just have a personal grudge with Peter York, and he slanders me like that. You can't listen to partiality. 35. Minister Millicent Barnold saw that Green was still arguing, and directly took out 2 wands and said, Then you mean that these 2 wands are not yours? We have already tried the flashback charm. Green, you are proud Luo, you should know what that means. Are you still saying that you didn't put the life-threatening spell on your wand? 35. Green saw his 2 wands, his pupils shrank, and then continued to quibble. I admit that one of the wands is mine, but it doesn't prove that I used the death charm. I was in a coma for so long. It may be someone used my wand to release the death-killing spell, and then framed me. Minister, you also know that I have caught many dark wizards and offended many people over the years. Professor Green, only I and Headmaster Dumbledore have touched your wand while you're in a coma. I'm sure I can't have such advanced black magic at such a young age. Are you suspecting that Dumbledore framed you? He's the greatest wizard. Why would you do that? Peter interjected, asking Green with an innocent look on his face. Dumbledore, who was silently watching, twitched at the corners of his mouth. This little guy actually put his name on it in order to convict Green. He really deserves to be a student of Slytherin. When Green saw Peter, hatred and fear flashed in his eyes, and then he said excitedly, I suspect that Peter York is not human at all. Before I was knocked out, I saw him directly transformed into a giant of more than 10 meters. Just like a bird snake. Check it out. Check him out. 99. Everyone looked at Green like an idiot, and Snape sneered directly, I don't think he needs to be convicted, his brain is probably broken, and he is already talking nonsense. What else can Peter York be if he is not a human? Weird. Green, are you sure you want to continue to mess around? Plead not guilty? Amelia Burns, director of the legal department, asked again, and then said solemnly, It seems that we can only ask with Veritaserum. Director, AC/DC, Green is an old Auror, and the elites of the Aurors are trained to resist Veritaserum. Even if they take Veritaserum, I'm afraid they won't know anything, the young wizard Rog reminded. Everyone was suddenly disappointed. If he couldn't confess his guilt, there would be no way to convict Green. And Green, who was bound, also flashed a smug look in his eyes, and he said, I'm wrong. 35. Looking at this situation, Snape stepped forward, took out a small bottle of colorless liquid, and said with a sneer, Don't worry, I just prepared a potent Veritaserum, which is much stronger than your inferior potions. Just one drop can make the most determined person reveal the secrets of his heart. Minister Millicent happily took the potion, then looked at Green, who looked surprised, and said to his assistant Rog, Give him 2 drops, because 1 drop is not enough to ask questions. When Snape heard the minister's words, he was a little unhappy about her questioning his potion level, and after feeding 2 drops, he reminded gloatingly, Let's just ask, I'm a potent Veritaserum, 1 drop is enough to make it worse. Anyone who speaks the truth. If 2 drops are taken, it may become unbearable and become a fool. The wizard's assistant Rog said angrily, Why didn't you say it just now? Just reminded now? I already said that taking 1 drop is enough, but your minister doesn't believe it. Snape didn't get used to him and replied directly. Okay, let's hurry up and ask. Amelia Burns interrupted, If the Veritaserum is too effective, people will become stupid later. Our time is short. At this time, Green, who was taking Veritaserum, fell into a special state of sedation and sat dazedly. What's your name? Amelia Burns first asked simply, wanting to see the efficacy of Veritaserum. Sarah Glynn. Green replied. Did you hunt magical animals in the Forbidden Forest? Did you use the Deathstroke on Peter York? Amelia asked seriously after confirming the effect of the medicine. Yes, Peter York found out about my animal trafficking, so I decided to silence him. Green replied unconsciously. As soon as they heard Green's words, even if they already knew that it was him, everyone was still shocked by Green's quick silence. Director Amelia frowned when she heard the words, and then asked inexplicably, Even if he is discovered, as long as a forgetting spell can make him forget you. Why do you want to kill people and silence them? Hogwarts has Dumbledore, and I'm not sure he can bring the forgotten memories back. If found, my hidden secrets will be found, and I will be locked up in Azkaban for the rest of my life. So there will be no future troubles. 55 Green's eyes are confused, and he said in a daze. As soon as she heard that there was still a secret, Amelia hurriedly asked, What's the deepest secret you have besides selling animals? Episode 100 Professor Green is a Death Eater. The reason for the encounter between the Longbottom and his wife. Hearing the question, Green's face showed a trace of struggle, and then he fell into unconsciousness and replied, My deepest secret is that I was once caught by Death Eaters, but the Dark Lord let me go. He let me continue to hide in the Ministry of Magic and tell the Death Eaters where the Aurors are. This way the Aurors will always be 1 step behind the Death Eaters. As soon as the words fell, the principal's office fell into silence, and everyone was shocked by the news. Minister Millicent's wand fell to the ground in shock, and the wizard's assistant's automatic feather note directly drew a long ink mark on the notebook. Merlin! Amelia exclaimed, not expecting that it was just a dark wizard's interrogation, but the Death Eaters were involved. And it was the traitor that the Death Eaters planted in the Ministry of Magic. As a powerful minister who dared to formally declare war on the Death Eaters during Voldemort's prosperous period, Millicent Barnold heard the name of the Death Eaters again at this time. It was like a lifetime. Immediately, he said to Amelia Burns with a serious expression, Director Burns, you ask him, since when did he work for the Death Eaters? Why is there no Death Eater mark on his arm? I was caught in ambush by Death Eaters in a 1978 pursuit. They brought me to the Dark Lord. He was so powerful that nothing I could think of was in front of him. Hiding. 99 Green returned to the road unconsciously, and then smiled madly. The Dark Lord let me go, and promised to give me wealth and status in the future, and after taking control of the Ministry of Magic, he will take over the Aurors division. Give me the long position. I have done a lot of credit for the dark magic, but I have never received the mark of honor bestowed by the Dark Lord. He thinks that I work in the Ministry of Magic, and the existence of the mark is not conducive to my hiding. But I didn't expect that the mighty Dark Lord would be defeated by a 1-year-old child. Although Green was unconscious, the emotions on his face kept changing. After the Dark Lord disappeared, the Death Eaters fled in all directions, and many were killed by Azkaban. I've been worrying about being found out all day too. Especially in the past many times when the Aurors arrested the Death Eaters escaped early. Then the Longbottom and his wife, who are also Aurors, became suspicious of me. Green's face showed a grin, so I revealed their whereabouts to Lestrange and the others. It's a pity that the Longbottoms were just tortured mad and didn't die. Peter was shocked when he heard Green's words. He didn't expect that it was just an animal trafficking case involving the Death Eaters, and there was also the matter of the Longbottom and his wife being besieged and tortured by the Death Eaters. You must know that the Longbottoms were originally the Aurors of the Ministry of Magic, but after Voldemort suddenly disappeared, they were caught by the unwilling Lestranges and other Death Eaters, who tortured them crazy with the Cruciatus. In St. Mungo's hospital, unrecognizable family. Oh, poor Frank and Alice, they had waited to win. Amelia Burns, who had a better relationship with the Longbottoms, was extremely distressed. Now when he heard that Green was the one responsible, he said to him with hatred, "It's because of you, a despicable and shameless guy, they are tortured and mad. They don't even recognize their favorite child. You are so damned." 99. Dumbledore's always calm face, at this time, showed an expression of grief that he had never seen before, and said in a deep voice, "I once went to see Frank and Emily, their child Neville often visits his parents, but they no longer know each other. He is." As the original members of the Order of the Phoenix founded by Dumbledore, the Longbottom and his wife have always been Dumbledore's right-hand man. At this time, when they heard that Green was the one who caused the Longbottom and his wife to be killed, the eyes of Green showed a terrifying indifference. Dumbledore, and everyone. Now, it's no longer just about dark wizards, hunting animals, and using the unforgivable curse. It's about the Death Eaters and the killing of the Longbottoms. Minister Millie Sembinord said very seriously, "We need to bring Green back to the Ministry of Magic for a public trial. Let this sinner get the punishment he deserves." "I agree to your request, Millicent, and it's time to give the Longbottoms an explanation." Dumbledore nodded. "Minister, look, what's going on with Green?" Roger, the wizard's assistant, said in a panic. "I saw Green twitching all over, foaming at the mouth, and looking like he was about to die." 0. Ask for flowers. "It's just that Veritaserum is so powerful that his body can't take it." "Don't worry, he won't die, he's just turned into an idiot," Snape said gloatingly. "Become an idiot? We still need a public trial at the Ministry of Magic. What a question can an idiot ask?" Amelia Burns said angrily, then pleading, looking at Snape, who was watching a good show, "Professor Snape, you made the Veritaserum just now, you must have a way to save him, please help." Looking at Snape's face, Dumbledore sighed and persuaded Snape, "Severus, you'd better help. For the sake of the Longbottoms being your colleagues, they need a result." 0. Hearing Dumbledore's words, Snape still listened, took out a vial, and threw it to the wizard's assistant. "Take it to him, and the symptoms will be relieved. You can't become an idiot, but don't even think about a complete cure." After taking the antidote, Green's condition was relieved, and the effect of Veritaserum also disappeared. Green regained consciousness again, but this time he looked desperate. He clearly remembered the process of the interrogation just now. Now that his deepest secrets have been dug up, he is facing ruin and imprisonment. "Headmaster Dumbledore, we'll take the prisoners back first, and when the trial is called, I'll ask you to come over," Minister Millicent said. Then he turned to look at Peter on the side, smiled and said, "Your name is Peter York, right? It's amazing to be able to catch such a powerful dark wizard at such a young age. We will also invite you as a witness during the trial. You have to be mentally prepared. My Phoenix has helped me a lot. In order to save me, he was hit with a life-threatening curse from Green. Now he is Nirvana," Peter said with a clever appearance, and then took out the Phoenix in his pocket and handed it to everyone to see, said aggrievely, "Professor Green will be punished, right? He attacked us frantically and used a lot of evil spells. I almost died." The fact that Peter owns the Phoenix is limited to spreading at Hogwarts. When the three ministers saw the Phoenix that they must win, they were surprised and looked down on the little wizard who could catch Green.